I had an amazing weekend at Nationals. I was very fortunate to make a run all the way to the top four out of more than 400 plus players, the largest event in Universe's history. And I just want to take this video to walk you through my journey of how I chose the list that I played, what my Swiss matchups were, which ones were the most fun, the most difficult, in top cuts, what were some interesting lines of play that occurred, next steps for me, and then just review the event as a whole, as well as everybody else that did well, especially George and Carson. Big congratulations to them for their number 1 and number 2 finishes, respectively. All right, let's jump into the night before. I brought 2 decks with me. If you watched my last video before Nationals, you would know I brought Todoroki and Mirio with me to the event. I brought Todoroki mainly to play retro. I was just playing 3 bangs in the main list. It was a 96 card Todoroki list on water, and I was playing 3 bangs, and then I was taking those bangs out and putting in 2 nullifies and a special edition collectible when I wanted to make it MHA only. My plan was to play Todoroki for retro and for the team's event on Sunday if I didn't make top cuts, and then to play Mirio in the main event. So I was kind of balancing both of these characters that I had some success on this year. And the day before, during retro, I played Todoroki, and I ended up going 2-1-1. My last round, I lost versus a Stone Man. It was a very hard matchup since I couldn't just build into deadlock like crazy. I did make a pretty crucial misplay on our game 2 when I lost. I thought that if I committed my character for an Ice Storm, I wasn't going to be able to make it lethal. I forgot that I had 3 momentum and that 7 more damage would have gotten it to exactly lethal. So I did make a misplay there, but I went 2-1-1 and felt really, really strong with Todoroki. I was just, with Todoroki on water especially, you always feel in control of the match. Even on the games you lose, you feel like you're in control. And with the Mirio list that I ended up playing, it feels very chaotic. It forces you to take risks, and typically I'm not a huge risk taker. I would like to feel more in control of the game and play conservative, and the Mirio list is the opposite of that. So my nature just gravitates more towards Todoroki, and I had some success on retro going 2-1-1, and then my brother, who was playing fundamentally the same Mirio list as me, played in some side events, and he played a mirror match, and then he played Life Overhaul, and he lost both. And then that night, we quickly went home and we tested the Mirio Life Overhaul match quite a bit more just to see if we could overcome it. And it started sowing some seeds of doubt in me as to whether I should play Mirio or maybe I should just play Todoroki, even though I didn't bring cards for a sideboard. So the night before the event, from about 11 p.m. to midnight, I was basically staring at my computer screen looking at my Todoroki list, and I almost switched to Todoroki. Now, I ended up staying with Mirio, primarily because in my last video, I said I was going to win with Mirio, and I want to be a man of my word and back my claim up, and I had brought my sideboard for Mirio, and the voice actor was going to be there. So I ended up sticking with my Mirio list, but I did have this moment of indecision the night before where I almost made a switch. And seeing how well Carson did with Water Todoroki at the event really, to me, shows that maybe the decision wasn't even as big as I thought it was. Although I do feel very fortunate that I stuck with Mirio. I should say that Water Todoroki, I feel like it has a really strong Overhaul matchup because he can out-control Overhaul. You know, Overhaul's weak early and weak late, and Todoroki is just totally fine with going to that late game, especially if you're on a 96 card, 100-plus card list like Carson's, and then mine was 96 cards. Partly because I had talked with Carson, we both played Water Todoroki in Orlando early in the year, and so we had talked, we had compared Todoroki lists. You know, I had messaged him when he made top cuts at Gen Con. Congratulations. I think he's probably the best Todoroki player out there right now. So he had convinced me to bring my list up to around 100 cards. But I feel like he has a good Overhaul matchup, but not a great Mirio matchup. And that's why I didn't feel 100% comfortable Todoroki going into it. All right, let's look at my Mirio list. It is a flat 50 cards extreme aggro list. I started this list as a meme about a month ago. I just thought, when I made top cuts at the Webcam RLE, I was playing a pretty aggressive 52 card Mirio, but it was still being respectful. I was still playing high value targets, You're So Obvious, Cheerleader, Back Alley Haymaker. Like, I was still playing decently defensive. And then after the event, because I had such bad Eraserhead matchups, I felt like I need to make a Mirio that can beat Eraserhead and Overhaul. And so I started making these like 60 plus card Mirio lists. And then about a month ago, I decided, what if that's the wrong answer? What if the right answer is just to play even more disrespectful? Like just to play insane aggro. And so what I did is I took my webcam RLE list that I made top cuts with, and I took out all the defensive cards. And then I just said, what would I put in instead if I wanted to be even more aggressive? And I took out Back Alley Haymaker. And so what resulted was, one, I put in the Unrivaled Combatants, because this overcomes Eraserhead, it overcomes Tapes, it overcomes Cooperation Offer, just so many, it overcomes a lot of bad matchups. And even if I don't absolutely need it, it's still, if you have a Lemillion of the big three out, it still gives a speed, and then you can also give an extra damage with Lemillion of the big three. So it's still a flip for +1/+1, even in matchups where it's not necessarily needed. And then the Manly Friendship came in. This was my very last addition to the list. I took out all Destined for Mainstream Success, put in Manly Friendship because it's +1 damage or -1 damage once per turn. And if I use the +1 damage on Phantom Threat, I can then respond for +1 speed. And because of all the Manly Friendship, the Self-Sack, the First Impressions, Lemillion of the big three, Raiding the Villain Hideout, plus this has Powerful 3, I'm consistently getting Phantom Threat to flash and draw. Like, other Mirio lists, you feel like, whoa, I actually did it when you make Phantom Threat have flash and draw. But in this list, it is the expectation. Phantom Threat will draw you a card because you are going to be adding 5 speed to that card. And everything runs through Phantom Threat. I'm just trying to start out with this massive Phantom Threat that's going to be, at least 10 or 11 speed, 9 to 11 speed, and then you're going to have to either eat it or commit out to block it. And then it's going to go to my momentum, and then I'll follow up with Rejuve on a 5, draw 2. I can make Rejuve really fast if I want. That was a kill condition, solid 10, 20% of the time, was just making a 20 speed Rejuvenating Smash. Yeah, and then by the time they're committed out, you can follow up with these slow jabs and assaults. It doesn't matter that they're slow if your rival's committed out, which they have to block the really fast stuff. First Impressions is key to the list. 3 damage to your Phantom Threat, respond for a speed, and if they block it, which they kind of are forced to, 3 speed to the next one. And then the other key to the list is just that you're always getting momentum on offense. You do not need to start your turn with a momentum for Capture Evildoer's form to clear your card pool, because Phantom Threat's going to go to your momentum, or you get this Rejuvenating Raiding the Villain's Hideout. If you've discarded a card, add the top card of your deck to your momentum. So there's no pressure to preserve your momentum on defense. I don't care if I have to use Mirio to cancel something out, or if somebody uses cards like Bad Guy Roundup or something to discard my momentum on their turn, because when it comes to my turn, I'm going to get the momentum using Phantom Threat or Rejuve Smash. Basically meaning that the Capture Evildoer's card pool clear is fundamentally free in this list, and that's a big reason people want to see Capture Evildoers banned. It's just too consistent. It also hurts people's playstyle if they have, a momentum-based deck. Having Capture Evildoers be everywhere hurts their playstyle. But then in lists like this, that discard 1 momentum cost is just not a cost. So easy to get that momentum. And so that's the gist of the list. I probably spent too long here. I do have like One for All Full Calling 5% for Recovery Girl and Nomu in my side. You're So Obvious. This is mainly an offensive card for me, because if they set my damage down, I can then remove to bring it back up. Same thing with speed. And then just Toolbox, some other things. I would side in Charging One for All, sometimes going second when I know that I'm going to get outbuilt. Just trying to get even greasier for that +3 speed or +5 damage when I need. The list fundamentally does not have any deadlock. The only deadlock is you're finished, and that's not even great deadlock. It's decent, but it's not great. And that is because we are not planning to ever go into deadlock. This is I'm going to win on turn 2 or turn 3 type list. All right. With that said, this was how my Swiss rounds went. And my brother played the same list, by the way. He had 1 less Unrivaled Combatant and 1 more It Can't Be Fixed, and he had a different sideboard. I'm not actually sure what his sideboard was. I'm going to have to wait to see with you guys when they finally release Top Cut deck list this afternoon. So this was how my matchups went. This was the first 7 rounds. I started 7-0 and then took 2 intentional ties to finish 7-0-2. I didn't have any easy matchups, And what I mean by that is like round one, All Might 2, the player that I faced, I believe he finished in the top 64, was probably my second hardest match of the entire day. We kept having these fun, like capture evildoers tug of wars, I'll steal your momentum. No, I'll steal your momentum. No, I'll steal it right back. And he was playing a very similar list. He was also playing Raiding the Villain's Hideout, except he was, of course, using the throws to just massively increase their damage. A very tough match. And then Evil Overhaul was being played by, I believe, William Anderson, and he made top 16, and he's going to go to the HLC with me. So big congratulations to William. I was his only loss of the day, but it certainly wasn't an easy matchup. You think your first three matches are going to be your easiest because once you're 3-0, 4-0, they start pairing you against other players that are 3-0, 4-0. But here I was getting paired against, super quality players early. The Ochako player that I played, I was his only loss for all of Saturday. He ended the day at 6-1. I think he barely missed top cuts. I think he went 6-3 to finish it out. I can't quite remember. And then I had these two mirror matches here of Mirio that I got to win both of those games. I faced Jacob, who's known as like the Nomu player, in round 6. This was my hardest and most fun match of the day, no doubt about it. And then played a Earth Overhaul in round 7, took the win. And then Sunday morning just took intentional ties. Although the Amajiki player, Barlow, I believe, we went ahead and played it out. And first we reported the tie. We reported that he won and went first, and then I won and went first, and then we tied. And then we actually played it out. We played the full hour into overtime, and that's actually what happened. So we just predicted the future when we predicted our tie. But I never did end up playing with my round 9 Earth Overhaul opponent. We just went ahead and took the tie. My round 2 Evil Overhaul opponent, by the way, if you watched my video, the top 10 deck lists I'm considering for Nationals, one of the ones was an Evil Overhaul list making use of Tongue Whip, Amphibious Ambush, Sticky Balls, and Maximum Overhaul, along with cards like Hand of Confession and Reconstruction, and you're just basically playing Tongue Whip over and over and over again. And you really overcome the lack of speed that Overhaul gives. And what I thought was really cool is that his list seemed very similar to that. He was playing the Tongue Whips and the Ambushes and the Sticky Balls and the Maximums and Reconstructions. So very, very cool to see that list played and to have a lot of success because, like I said, he's going to the HLC with me. In that game, I did have a fun time where there was a turn. It was on my first attack. He used Reconstruction to build Tongue Whip into a stage. And so I just thought, okay, he built his low. He has a low block in his stage. I know the other face down card in his stage is a mid block. So then that told me to call highs that turn. Other than that, I would always call low with Mirio unless I was given a reason to call high. Like if they're playing 4x Instant Shining Flash and there's not a lot of them in their discard, they're probably holding on to them. Don't call low. If they're sideboarding like Amajiki, sideboarding into concentrates, and you can tell they're holding on to them, maybe you don't want to call low, you want to call high. 90% of the time, I'm going to call low, unless I can either make a soul read that they're only holding low blocks, or there's a very specific reason. And so Overhaul building in Tongue Whip gave me a specific reason, right? Because I know there's a low block in the stage. Although it could be said, hey, if you want to play a longer game, you might as well get him to use that Tongue Whip, right? There were 2 players that killed me on turn 2 throughout the day. That was Earth Overhaul in round 7 and Death Ochako 2. Death Ochako 2 killed me on turn 2 with a Hulking Grimace. I had a bad build. And then, I couldn't block the Hulking Grimace. He got to play it again and then finished me off with some stun grenades and killed me turn 2. This Earth Overhaul list killed me on turn 2. He played, I believe he played Back Alley Haymaker, and I had 2 high blocks in hand. And turn 2 on Mirio is scary if you're going second because you don't have momentum. So you don't get that free block that you normally would get. So I got 2 high blocks in hand. I had a pretty decent build. So I've got a healthy stage. And Overhaul doesn't add speed to things, right? So I think he went Back Alley Haymaker into Hardened Frenzy. I block the Hardened Frenzy because I don't care that it's going to build down. I'm just trying to live because all I need is 1 turn to win the game. I block the Hardened Frenzy, plays another Hardened Frenzy. I full block that Hardened Frenzy. He's built both of them down now. He plays a Maximum Overhaul, picks up his Hardened Frenzies, builds, then he replays his Hardened Frenzies and just kills me. So he played like 7 attacks on hardly any foundations. Just Just, just an awesome turn two. Sometimes Overhaul just does that to you, especially with Maximum Overhaul. The Maximum Overhaul Hardened Frenzy combination is just a really cool interaction, in my opinion. The match that I want to talk about a little bit is definitely round 6 with Jacob with Nomu. I won the die roll, but I lost game 1. Game 2, was this game 2 or game 3? There's 2 separate lines that I want to talk about. One is I had a bad build early on. I think this was game 2. I had a very poor build. And then my next turn, I drew all attacks and 1 foundation. Like I drew 4 attacks, capture evildoers, 1 foundation. So you just have to do what your hand tells you to do, right? So I lead Phantom Threat, get momentum, and then I actually check a 3 on my Phantom Threat, and I have 3 foundations. So I have to commit 2 foundations for my Phantom Threat. But I can't just build 1 foundation and pass. That's not going to do any good for me. That's not going to help me gain tempo whatsoever, So I had Rejuve in my hand, had to go for the Rejuve on a 5. If I check a 3 there and I have to commit my character and my last foundation, hopefully I at least draw 2 foundations and get to build 3 and pass, but I'm probably just dead. But I check a 5, I draw 2, and then I play Valiant Assault, check a 5, draw 2 more, and then I capture Evildoers, card pool clear. Valiant Assault is awesome for helping progressive because you get to peak if it deals damage, and typically by your 3rd or 4th attack you are dealing damage. And then I got to play Hardened Jab on a 4, checked a 3, didn't matter, picked up a foundation and readied 1, and then played another Valiant Assault on a 5 and checked a 5. So on 3 foundations, I played 5 attacks, and on my first attack, I checked a 3. So I played 4 attacks on 1 foundation after that point. And fundamentally, that is why Capture Evildoers is not a fair card. That should not have been allowed to happen. But I played 5 attacks. By the end of it, I only had 2 cards in my card pool. I had a billion cards in my hand, and I got to build. I had a nice build turn. So it was just crazy. Like, I gained all the tempo on that turn, and I just shouldn't have been able to do that, but I was. The next game, we went pretty long, and he went on this attack string, like back alley into something else, into back alley, Relentless Barrage. I was down to 9 health. And he goes and picks up another Relentless Barrage. Or I was down to something. I Mirio'd the first Relentless Barrage when he took it up to 9. And I took it down to 0 damage. And then he played another Relentless Barrage, except it was on an 8. And he checked a 3, which meant he could still pass it, but he was going to have to commit his character. And of course, you don't want to commit Nomu if it's not going to be lethal, and it would have only been 5 damage without the damage pump from Nomu, so he was unable to pass the check. But that round, like, my one hope basically was that he checked 2 3s on the 7 and the 8, because when he played the Relentless Barrage on a 7, he also checked a 3, played the second one on an 8 and checked a 3. If either of those were 5, I'm just dead that turn, and he wins the round. Got very, very lucky. But hey, look, if you go 7-0, chances are you probably got lucky along the way, and you just have to play to your outs. This game, like, even when things look bleak, sometimes things can just change quickly, and you just play to the outs that you have. The next turn against Nomu, I didn't draw many attacks, but I drew a 1-for-all full cowling 5% strike, made it fast. He couldn't block it. I got it to 14 damage, and 1-for-all full cowling goes first. So Nomu's committed after the block step before the damage step. And so he had to eat the 14 damage, and then I won the game. So the 1-for-all full cowling 5% getting sighted in actually won me that round against Nomu, but it also won me the round that he checked 3s on that 7 and 8. But that was how my Swiss rounds went. Nomu and All Might 2 were by far my closest rounds. The other rounds, even though, like, here I won 2-1, 2-1, and 2-1, they still didn't feel relatively close. I think it's because I won the die roll on these games, and winning the die roll just means a lot when you're playing a 50-card aggro list. So that's how my Swiss went. 7-0-2. And by the way, one thing I didn't say here about my list, this Raiding the Villain, Hideout, and Lemillion, these are what I want to see on turn 1. If I draw Raiding and Lemillion turn 1, it feels like I'm going to win turn 2. This combination is just so incredibly potent. Getting to add If you have these out, then between your character, rating, and Lemillion, you're adding +1 speed, +5 damage on every attack. When you start adding those kind of stats, 3 Valiant Assaults can kill an Overhaul at full health. 9, 18, 27. And yeah, it's just insane stats at that point. All right, so that was Swiss. I should say that my brother used the same list, and he finished 6-1-2. And the last round was an intentional tie. He actually intentionally tied with Carson, who was on Water Todoroki. So between the two of us, taking out intentional ties, we went 13 wins, 1 loss, 1 tie during Swiss. And my brother was going second most of the time. He said he was losing all of his die rolls. So while I won 6 out of 7 of my die rolls, my brother lost most of his, and he still went 6-1-2. So between the two of us, not counting intentional ties, we were 13-1-1, and I think we thoroughly proved the list. 15 rounds of top cuts, we only lost 1 game together. All right, so I was Swiss champ, number 1 seed overall, top seed going into top cuts, and this was basically how I felt. If you're, the don't try it, Anakin, I have the high ground. That's basically how I felt. Like, it's so important to this aggressive Mirio list that you go first. And so being the top seed going into top cuts meant a lot to me. Just always being able to go first is going to cover up a lot of weaknesses that the list has. All right, so that brings me to my top 32 match, where I played Ben Hines, Chaos Amajiki. Ben made top cuts at the webcam RLE, by the way, with Kirishima 3. I think he's the only player to have top cut with Kirishima 3 so far. Maybe there was one other. But we played, and this was an extremely difficult match. Came down to game 3, and on game 3, he built all of his Mirio hate. He was playing a lot of concentrates to stop capture evildoers. He had decoy duplicates. He had League of Villains, the asset. He had villains defeated to stop my combos. And anti-voice, if I made something over double damage, it didn't matter that it was a mid block, it would still deal no damage. So he had all of this Mirio hate, and on his turn 1, he built it all. And so it was always an uphill battle, going against Amajiki. And once Amajiki gets established with a few decoy duplicates and broken psyches and momentum, he just becomes too hard to kill. And he was very, very close to taking a stranglehold on game 3. Basically, there was a turn. He had 2 momentum and a decoy duplicate and several other things out that was strong against Mirio. And I knew that I either had to win that turn or I was going to lose the game, because he was just going to get a stranglehold on the match. So I draw my hand, and I drew some attacks, but only one that actually drew more cards. I only drew 1 assault, I think, or rejuvenating. I can't remember which was which. And he had a decoy duplicate out. So I play all my attacks, and I called high because I felt like he was holding on to a concentrate, the 1 low block in my mind, and just felt like high was right. And it turned out it was right. It became very apparent that he didn't have a high block. So I play my attacks, and there was one really funny interaction that happened. Hardened Jab as my penultimate attack, I play, and he uses Amajiki's once per turn to give my Hardened Jab +3 damage, because that made it more than double for anti-voice. So I, thought about it and thought, why did he just give my attack damage? Probably because he has an anti-voice in hand. So I destroyed my You're So Obvious to return my attack down to printed damage. And then I used Raiding the Villain's Hideout to bring it back to lethal. Forced to blocked with Ice Stormbreaker 2, but it didn't matter because my next card was Calorie Counter, and won the game. So, and it did come down to, I accidentally committed Mirio, because in my mind, sometimes you just make these brain dead plays. In my mind, I just thought, it's going to be a high, but then I kept my Lemillion of the Big 3 up to give it a speed, because I could only keep one thing up on my check. So it came down to he checked a 3 and couldn't pass the check to block it. But if I had just kept Mirio up and thought about it for a second, I would have just made it a high, and it still would have, half would have been lethal. But that was top 32. Took down Amajiki. Go to top 16, and I'm playing Jose on Death Eraserhead. If you're not familiar, Jose won the Webcam RLE with Death Eraserhead. Jose and I had played in the Webcam RLE in round 4. We were both 3-0 after lunch break, and we played, and he thoroughly spanked me that round. And that was part of why I just went on this hunt after that event to find out how Mirio could overcome Eraserhead. Also, Jose and I played in last year's Nationals in round 8. It was basically a win and end because the winner would have been 6-2, and then could have just intentionally tied. Last year, 6-2-1 was good enough to get into top cuts. At least most of the 6-2-1 players, I believe. And so Jose was 2-0 against me for our lifetime rounds. And I told him at the event during Swiss rounds, I said, I hope we play this weekend because you've never beaten me 3 times. You know, technically you're 2-0 against me, but you never beaten me 3 times. So this was our big rematch, right? Death Eraserhead versus Good Mirio. And this time I ended up getting the win. I did get lucky in game 1 in the sense that if he had another attack, he would have had lethal. So he played Erase, and then he responded with his character to commit his character to draw 2 cards, but he didn't draw another attack. And then Eraserhead was committed, and I got to backswing for lethal. So I got lucky game 1, but that is the risk that you take with Eraserhead sometimes, especially when you're playing this aggressive death list, is that you just have to hope sometimes that you draw into the lethal attack string. Game 3, I did get pretty greedy at one point because I knew first impressions was going to be really key to pushing through the Eraserhead's wall, because he's going to block the Phantom threat, and then getting 3 speed on the next move is going to be really critical. And so I had a few cards in my card pool, and I was going for my build out. And if I checked a 3 on first impressions, I was going to have to commit my character and a foundation. And so I went for it, and I checked a 3, and I committed Mirio. I committed Mirio because I knew I was going to need this foundation on my turn. And then I also had a You're So Obvious built, so I felt like, well, I had a You're So Obvious like already in the card, but I had it built, and so I felt like, well, I have half of Mirio online. So I had the first impressions, You're So Obvious, and something else, and I successfully built them and survived the turn, and then won on the backswing. And first impressions was a big part of that. So a lot of times I was playing a little greedy because I knew it was going to take being a little greedy to overcome this matchup, right? So I win against Jose here. And then top 8, I go and play someone who's on fire, Tokoyami. And he said that he had gotten his list from Jacob Johnson, who made top cuts at Gen Con. So I was very familiar with the list, but I honestly hadn't practiced against it a lot. And it was insane. It felt like every game, we played 3 games, it felt like every game he was drawing 2 or 3 Twisting Azures, always had the Summon Dark Shadows, always had Sugar Rushes. It was just an insane match. Game 1, I could not draw attacks. So I had built to 9 foundations, and it was my turn 3. And I draw my hand, and I draw 1 attack, and it's Rejuvenating. He's at 13 health at this point, because I had done 7 damage on turn 2. But I drew only 1 attack, and I'm at like 3 health, so I absolutely have to kill on this turn. But all I've got is Rejuvenating. So I think that's fine. I'll draw more attacks off of Rejuvenating. So I play a foundation, play Rejuvenating, respond, draw 2. I draw 2, both foundations. And I think I'm toast at that point. But then I look down at my stage and I realize I have Raiding the Villain's Hideout, I have Lemillion of the Big Three, I have Unrivaled Combatant, and I have 2 Manly Friendships. So using Raiding, I got it to 8 damage. Use my character, get it to 10 damage. Use Lemillion of the Big Three, get it to 11 damage. Use Manly Friendship, get it to 12. Use Manly Friendship, get it to 13. He says -1 damage with Tokoyami, takes it back to 12. And then I flip Unrivaled Combatant and change its zone, give it a speed, and then I use Lemillion of the Big Three again for another damage and get it to 13. And then I got the free momentum from Raiding the Villain's Hideout, got to EX at 3. He only had 1 foundation up, and just ended up dealing lethal on just my Rejuvenating, because Rejuvenating becomes really, really fast. That's one of the big benefits of that card. It's not just there for the momentum generation and the draw. It just has EX3 on it for some reason. And sometimes a 10 or 20 speed Rejuvenating is all you need. And then game 2, I lost. And game 3, I can't remember anything very specific about game three. I know I won on three foundations. I won on three foundations. I would have won on turn two, except my checks didn't go my way. And then he was one away from lethal and killing me. And then I drew my hand on my turn three, and I checked fives that time. You know, check fives take lives. And that's just how it goes. So, yeah, it was interesting when he was in game two. There was a point where if I had had a one low block in my hand, it was for lethal just on its face, his attack. And my only hope was that he increased the damage and then I could Mirio and take it to zero. But I couldn't Mirio early because if I Mirioed early, he could just take the damage back up to lethal. So I had to like try and fake him out and pretend that I had the block or something, but he didn't bite. He just sent it through and I showed high blocks and died. But I won top 8. And then top 4 came, and I'm playing George, who's on Life Overhaul. Now, I had thought that with, at this point, Andrew Holder and Travis Tangeman, both on Life Overhaul, and both of them were no longer in the tournament, I was hoping that that was going to be all for Life Overhaul, and I wouldn't have to play this character again. But George was on Life Overhaul. So this was like the big boss, you know, Eraserhead and Life Overhaul were the matchups I was nervous for. I didn't play them in Swiss. Even though I played really solid players in Swiss, I never did play the matchups that I feared. And so in top 16, I did play a matchup I feared with Jose on Death Eraserhead. And then in top 4, I'm playing the other big boss, Life Overhaul. You know, the life decks, Recovery Girl, Overhaul, and Momo were the ones that I was scared of. So game 1, I go first, and I win on turn 2. You know, I draw Raiding the Villain's Hideout, I draw the Villain of the Big Three, I draw the gas on turn 2, I get to capture evildoers, and everything just goes burr, and I win the game. Game 2 and game 3, I checked insanely poorly, which hurts when you're playing an aggressive list, right? Especially when, if Life Overhaul is allowed to stay at full health for several turns, if he's allowed to make his stage the way he wants it, then you are just not going to be able to win that game. So I knew I couldn't let the games go long. You have to deal at least like 15 to 20 damage early to make him uncomfortable, to make him have to block from his stage, force Life Overhaul to blow up foundations with release. You can't let him just way out tempo you and take control of the game. So I knew that in this matchup, I had to play extremely aggressive, and my deck punished me for playing extremely aggressive. On game 2, I checked, I was going for a lethal attack string, and I checked 3 3s in a row. It didn't work out. I had to pass back and then got killed. And then on game 3, I'm going first again, and I draw a hand, and I have 3 foundations. A million of the big 3, a 1 diff, and a 0 diff. And I thought, normally I would keep this, but in this matchup where I have to be aggressive early, I think I need better. I think I need a 4 foundation build, and I need a Raiding the Villain's Hideout. So I mulligan my hand, and I draw into a hand with only 2 foundations. And they were like terrible ones. It was like self-sack and you're finished or something. And then on my next turn, I tried to play a few attacks and then draw more, and then I was going to have this solid build out, but I wanted to at least get a momentum, and checked 3s again, and everything went poorly, and I felt a little stupid. That's how, when you play aggressive decks and your deck doesn't cooperate, you can feel a little dumb after taking the line, right? Because if things go well, you look like a genius. If things don't go well, you look really dumb. It's like an NFL coach when they go for it on 4th and 1, you know, instead of kicking a field goal. If they get the first down, everybody cheers and you're a genius. If you don't get the first down, you're talking about it in the press conference later, like, you know, you guys only lost by 2. If you had kicked a field goal there, you would have won the game. And everybody's going to start doubting you, right? It felt a little like, you ever have those dreams where you're back in school and then you look down, you don't have pants on? That's basically how games 2 and 3 felt. Felt like my deck was thoroughly pantsed, and George won the round. And then credit to George, he went on to play Carson and Shoto Todoroki and won that game as well. And if you watched my video on how to beat Overhaul, I said Mirio and Shoto 1 were bad matchups for Overhaul. Mirio was a bad matchup because he could beat him early when he's weak, when his stage isn't yet built and he's having to fuel his stage using his hand. And Shoto is a bad matchup because he can out-control Overhaul, right? Overhaul's not adding speed to things. Shoto can just full block everything and wait for his opportune moment and add a billion damage to all of his attacks. And George overcame both matchups that I thought were bad matchups for Overhaul. So huge credit to George, just a phenomenal player. And congratulations on winning the event. As for me, my next stop will be the HLC in February in Orlando. I started this year by going to the HLC. This year's HLC was in Las Vegas, and I was not one of the 32 players. I just started playing last year in late August, September, sometime around fall of last year. So I went to the HLC just to play in side events, and I was insanely jealous of the 32 players that got to play in the tournament. It was really fun playing in side events. It was really fun getting early access to League of Villains cards. It was the first event where I played Todoroki because I was playing him in the constructed format. I was trying to iterate to get ready for the first RLE. It was a lot of fun, but I was insanely jealous. And I told myself at that event, I am going to be here next year as a player. I will be one of the 32 players in the HLC. I do not want to come here again and just play side events. And I feel really proud of this year, how this year went, that I finally got to qualify and that I'll be one of the players at the HLC. It means a lot to me. And then this year, just as I've progressed as a player, last year at Nationals, I went 6-3 and bubbled out. In Florida, I got top cuts, but I lost in the first round. Webcam event this season, I got top cuts, but I lost in the first round. And then finally getting to top cuts. I'll be honest, when we went to game 3, me and Ben, and the Amajiki player in top 32, I started having these these internal doubts, like, okay, here it goes again. You make top cuts and you lose in the first round, and so when I won that matchup, it felt like a huge burden was lifted off my shoulders, that, it just proved that I can not only make top cuts, but I can actually make a run in top cuts. Would have liked to have made it to finals, but credit to George, thoroughly beat me in top 4. All right, and that's it for me. Let's just look at the event, and I'll talk about some surprises. There really weren't any major surprises. Like, if you go back and watch my tier list, the only characters that made top cuts that aren't in my A tier were Midoriya 4 and All For One, and both of those characters were in my B+ tier. So they weren't huge surprises. Even though I don't consider them a top 30 character, they still made top cuts. And Dylan has been playing Midoriya 4 constantly since an Undaunted raid has been released. He was my win-in match at the webcam RLE. He was on Void Midoriya, and he sideboarded into Void Eraserhead. And then I believe he made top cuts at Gen Con on Midoriya 4. If he didn't make top cuts, he was a win-in. So he's been practicing all year with Deku 4. So big congratulations to Dylan for making it to the HLC on the character that he spent a lot of time making this list on and getting practice. And then All For One, I thought that he wasn't going to be strong enough to overcome Capture Evildoers. That was when I put him in the B+ tier on my tier list. I said he'd probably be an A tier character if it wasn't for Capture Evildoers. So big credit to Scott for overcoming Capture Evildoers being so prevalent in the format and still taking All For One to top cuts. All For One is probably a pretty underplayed character. I know Todoroki probably surprised a lot of people, but if you watch my channel, it didn't surprise me. I consider Todoroki a top 30 character. I have him in my A tier. I think that the water symbol is below the other symbols, but the 7-handers play the water symbol really well. The water symbol lends itself to a control type game plan, and Todoroki getting the cancel is just the ultimate control character next to Eraserhead. And then he just gets to, as soon as you have a weakness, he gets to add 10, 12 damage to every single one of his attacks. I had a game in Retro, actually, where I got my Tongue Whip to like 30 damage, and it was I had one card left in my deck, and it was for lethal on a half block, and won me the game. It's just pretty fun. So Todoroki doesn't really surprise me. Mineta too, I have him in my A tier. I was surprised a little bit just because people haven't been playing him. But other than that, everything is what we expected. We expected the Tokoyamis, Jiro, Overhaul, Mirio, Amajiki. There really wasn't any surprise here. And as for everybody who qualified for the HLC, you're not seeing a lot of names that we're used to, right? Like Tam Cardwell, Andrew, Kevin, Tim, Jesse. Like we're missing some of the big players in the game. But I know a lot of these names. Like, of course, there's me. We got Jose Narono, Byron, Daniel Nelson, I believe was HLC last year on Tokoyami. And here we see run Tokoyami back and get to the HLC. George on Life Overhaul, Dylan. He's not a new name. He's been doing really well with Midoriya 4 this season. William, Justin Birch. Justin Birch got to top 4 at Gen Con with Air Jiro. So he's certainly not a surprise. Travis Tangeman, he top cuts every event he ever plays in, it feels like. Phil Birch has been with the game for a long time, made top cuts at both nationals last year, but just barely missed on the HLC. William Anderson made top cuts at Las Vegas just a few months ago. Carson made top cuts at Gen Con with Todoroki. So while we're missing a few of the big names for the HLC this year, I think everybody who made it to top 16 and qualified for the HLC is very, very deserving. And that was my event in a nutshell. I should point out that my brother Patrick did lose in top 32 to Earth Overhaul. Patrick started his day by playing like 4 or 5 overhauls in a row. And Earth and Evil Overhaul is normally a very, very easy matchup for us. But here, Patrick going second got overcome by Earth Overhaul, and Earth Overhaul got the win. So we made top cuts together, but we didn't quite qualify for the HLC together. Maybe next year we can change that and we can both be in the HLC. But I am really looking forward to the HLC and seeing everyone there. Even if you didn't qualify, I would highly encourage you to come. Like I said, I went this year to the HLC even though I wasn't qualified. Had a blast at the side events. I was insanely jealous of the players, but I used that jealousy to drive me to become a better player. And here I am going to the HLC. And just very, very excited. And I will see everyone there. And I have a goal to win the entire event. But that's going to do it for me today, guys. We got deck lists coming out soon, and I'm going to be doing deck list reviews for all 3 regions.